He was a star in the NBA.
He was one of the top basketball players.
And she was the girl of his dreams.
She was the spotlight of wherever she went. Her smile, her personality, her looks.
For this dynamic pair, the world was their oyster.
She loved Eddie and Eddie loved her.
Until a shocking tragedy tore their bond asunder.
You see nothing but poof blood.
Unleashing an investigation that would expose a salacious tale of professional misconduct and unspeakable violence.
Opening that door was like a nuclear bomb dropping.
This case involves brutal murder, NBA superstars, multiple love triangles, and gang retributions. Everywhere you turn, there's a new mystery.
January 24th, 2009. It's a blustery Saturday evening in the trendy Chicago neighborhood of South Loop. But the weather's the last thing on Yolande Henry's mind as she and her boyfriend, Reginald Corner, drive to the upscale townhouse her 24-year-old daughter, Nova, calls home. Earlier that day, Nova was mysteriously absent from her beloved grandmother's funeral, and repeated calls to her cell phone have gone unanswered.
We're almost at the house, and I'll call you back later to let you know what's going on, okay?
At this point, I've got like everybody trying to call her, and we're not getting any answers.
Filled with a growing sense of dread, Yolande and Reginald make their way to the front door.
As we was going up the stairs, that eerie feeling just was there.
What Reginald and Yolande discover next is every parent's worst nightmare.
I opened the door to find Nova laying on the floor in a pool of her own blood.
Wait, okay, don't touch anything, don't touch.
It appears Nova has been shot multiple times in the back, chest, and head. But that's not the worst part. Lying beside her bullet-riddled body is her 10-month infant, Ava.
I just remember being frozen. After that part, things became a blur. I could hear myself screaming and just lying on the floor.
Nova and Ava had been both shot in the head.
Both the young mother and daughter are dead, but the nightmare is just beginning. Nova also has a 3-year-old son.
I didn't know whether he was left in the house.
But fear for Nathan's safety is quickly eased.
What they found, in addition to Nova and Ava's body, was her son, who was alive, but sleeping.
Her son was found in the chair with a blanket in the same room with Nova and Ava.
Yolande's grandson is covered in his mother's blood, but otherwise appears unharmed. Yolande and Reginald call 911.
Chicago emergency repair.
Yeah, can I get the police?
You need an ambulance?
Yeah, bring the ambulance, the police down.
Moments later, investigators and EMTs arrive on the scene. But not even the most jaded among them can fathom what unspeakable evil had touched this family, or the house of horrors they were about to expose.
I can't even describe it. It was just something like I was in a movie or something, I guess. I mean, it was like unreal.
Born in 1984, the oldest of 3 siblings, Nova Henry grew up in a loving home in southeast Chicago.
Nova was the big sister kind of mama to them, and they always looked up to her. She was small in stature, but big in personality.
A bright and bubbly teenager, Nova loved hanging out with friends, listening to music, and most of all, dancing.
I think what made us such good friends was our love for dancing. Our personalities just seemed to click.
Nova became a star on our high school pom-pom squad.
We went to the Apollo in New York twice. We all loved dancing to kind of stay out of trouble.
Naturally, the vivacious teenager had plenty of suitors, but one guy stood head and shoulders above the rest. 7 foot tall, Eddie Curry.
They had been friends first and foremost since junior high school. He respected her friendship and she respected his.
She thought that he had a great personality. He always made her laugh.
A gifted athlete, Eddie became a dominant force on their high school basketball team. Named a McDonald's High School All-American player, Eddie also earned the coveted title of Mr. Basketball in the state of Illinois.
Eddie was one of the top basketball players in high school.
With Eddie towering over the competition on the hardwood and Nova on the courtside cheering him on, these two friends grew close. And over their senior year, their friendship blossomed into a full-fledged romance.
I could tell that Nova was falling for Eddie. This was someone that she found a liking to, and I hope that it would go down the path of happiness.
To see them together was kind of awkward because she was so small and he was big, but he made her happy. So, you know, I was happy for her.
After graduation, the young couple's fortunes soared when Eddie decided to skip college and go pro. He was selected 4th overall in the 2001 NBA draft.
He was a young man who had come into kind of like a jackpot.
But after signing a lucrative multi-million-dollar contract with his hometown Bulls, Eddie was quickly sucked into the never-ending travel and day-to-day grind of professional basketball.
As an NBA superstar, it can be incredibly challenging to maintain a faithful relationship at home. You have women throwing themselves at you in every city.
Not that Eddie let the time away from home or the temptations of the road stand in the way of his love for Nova.
Nova flew in and out of town frequently to visit him. She loved him a lot. Eddie loved her as well.
Of course, the beautiful and independent Nova had ambitions of her own. Enrolling in Illinois State University in 2003, Nova knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life.
She's always wanted to have a future career in dentistry and have her own office.
With both their careers taking off, these high school sweethearts seemed destined for greatness. Until one day, Nova was blindsided by some unexpected news.
Eddie Curry married?
What?
Eddie was actually seeing a young lady by the name of Corey, and unbeknownst to Nova, he actually married her.
Nova found out by reading the newspaper.
Who is Corey?
So it was very hurtful when Nova found out about that.
But just 6 months into the marriage, Eddie filed for divorce from his new wife. In Nova's eyes, this proved that Eddie was still in love with her.
She got over it fairly quick because the paper is saying that he's asking for a divorce. So she looked at it as though he's trying to right his wrong and correct it.
Nova's hunch was right on target. Once the divorce was final, Eddie put the full court press on Nova.
He had sent a driver to come get her. She went out of town with him. Nova started going out to dinner with the Bulls players.
Nova and Eddie's love connection seemed stronger than ever. So strong that when Eddie was traded to the New York Knicks in 2005, Nova put her dental school dreams on hold and began splitting time between Chicago and New York.
She was in college, she was being flown to basketball games. You know, that's a pretty exciting lifestyle to live at such a young age.
Later that year, Nova gave birth to a beautiful baby boy named Nathan.
When he was born, I saw a great change in Nova. From that day forward, she was just a mother.
2 years later, in 2008, Nova and Eddie had another child, daughter Ava.
She was just like the most beautiful chocolate baby. That's what I call it, my little chocolate mommy.
With 2 beautiful children and an NBA star boyfriend, life had never looked better for Nova Henry. But Nova's happiness came to a horrifying end on January 24th, 2009.
I just can never imagine that somebody would hurt my child or my grandchild.
I can't express in words, actually. I've seen a lot of things, nothing like that.
But as cops swarm the scene, they're about to learn a shocking revelation. One that will not only expose a life of lies, but cast a seemingly fairy tale romance in a far more sinister light.
When I found out, I just couldn't believe the person that did this. I'm just like, no. This can't be what's going on.
Nova Henry and NBA star Eddie Curry were beloved high school sweethearts. Together, they had 2 beautiful children and the world at their feet.
They were happy and he respected Nova. He showed that he cared for her.
He was kind of a breath of fresh air. Nova was in love with him.
But their dream life together is severed on January 24th of 2009. After Nova unexpectedly missed her grandmother's funeral, her mother Yolan checks on her and makes a terrifying discovery.
I remember her lying on her back and just blood everywhere. And at that point, I think I just went into hysterics.
Nova's death is only part of the tragedy. Her 10-month-old daughter, Ava, has also been murdered.
She was lying at the foot of her mom, and they had been shot multiple times.
Thankfully, Nova's 3-year-old son, Nathan, was unharmed in the attack.
There were blood smears on the walls. He had to have been, for lack of a better word, plain in the pool of blood left there by his mother and baby sister.
As the coroner's team removes the bodies to prep them for autopsy, detectives begin processing the scene. Even for the most seasoned officers, this double homicide is beyond the pale.
When you have a young mother and a 10-month-old baby who are both shot in the head, certainly victims as young as Ava was, it's terrible.
There was blood everywhere. It was a crime scene like no other. And to imagine who could have done this to this beautiful young woman and her child, it could have only been a monster.
Based on the position of the bodies and the numerous shell casings scattered throughout the home, detectives surmise the attack on Nova and her daughter originated from the back of the residence.
There was a trail of blood that led from the back room of Nova's home to the front door.
She ran for her life with her small infant in her arms. Those bullets went through Ava's head.
But what could have sparked this deadly rampage? Given that the attack originated from inside the house and that there are no signs of forced entry, detectives can rule out one possible motive.
No signs of a robbery or a burglary of any kind.
Is the gunman someone Nova knew and trusted? To Nova's friends and family, it's hard to believe anyone would want to intentionally harm her and Ava.
Nova was very outgoing, very compassionate. She had a million friends.
If you knew Nova, you loved her. There wasn't a way not to like her unless you just were, hell-bent on not liking her, and that would have been your own fault.
Questioning Nova's friends and family, investigators discover Nova's relationship with Eddie was more complicated than they realized.
Nova and Eddie, I believe their ups and downs started shortly after she was gonna leave college.
Nova knew I didn't necessarily agree with her decision to keep seeing and dating Eddie. He had been so dishonest throughout the relationship.
According to Nova's friends, she had only recently gotten over the shock of Eddie's surprise first marriage. But no sooner had she forgiven Eddie than Nova got wind of another equally as shocking engagement.
She found out that he was getting married.
This time to a woman named Francine.
She was working for the Bulls organization or working at their practice center.
We did find out via the news that he had actually gone and gotten married. He hadn't told Nova anything about it. And she basically was devastated.
For Nova, the insult was amplified by the fact that at the time, she herself was 5 months pregnant with her and Eddie's son, Nathan.
Nova was again blindsided and completely caught off guard. She was hurt.
She was very upset. I mean, I just imagine you're pregnant and you hear your child's father's getting married. You wouldn't even think he was in a relationship.
According to friends, shortly after Nathan was born, Eddie's financial support for Nova and baby Nathan began to wane.
The financial support was not coming in anymore.
At that point, Nova hired a local attorney named Frederick Goings to negotiate a formal child support arrangement.
So the feedback that I got from different people was, he's a good attorney, he's a hungry attorney, so I figured we could use him.
Hiring Frederick Goings paid off. A Chicago court granted Nova $6,000 a month in child support. But surprisingly, once the case settled, Nova and Eddie rekindled their romance.
She showed me a tattoo that she had got with Eddie's name on it. And that's when I knew they were back fooling around.
She was dealing with a married man. She knew it was wrong, but, you know, she loved him.
But shortly after baby Ava was born, Eddie did another about-face and began to dispute Nova's claim that he was Ava's father. Nova and her attorney, Frederick Goings, had no choice but to haul Eddie back to court.
She wasn't setting out to purposely ruin Eddie's life or his wife's life.
There was a DNA test done to determine the paternity of Ava, and it was revealed that Eddie Curry was the biological father.
Based on his lucrative NBA contract and the fact that he was proven to be the father of both of Nova's children, Eddie was ordered to pay her $15,000 a month in child support. To investigators, this hefty payment raised the question, could Eddie be a person of interest in Nova's murder?
$15,000 is a substantial sum even for an NBA superstar. And to have to pay that every month certainly gives Eddie a reason to be upset.
For friends, family, and especially investigators, there's just one thing to do. Find Eddie Curry, and find him fast.
To me, the hunt was on.
Nova Henry and NBA star Eddie Curry engaged in a passionate, nearly decade-long romance that produced two beautiful children. But when Eddie marries not once, but twice behind Nova's back, she seeks and is awarded $15,000 a month in child support.
She thought that he would willingly pay for his expenses because he knew that this was his baby. She was more so focused about him supporting the kids versus what Eddie and his wife are doing with themselves.
But just 4 months after winning her battle for child support, Nova and her infant daughter Ava are found gunned down inside Nova's upscale Chicago townhouse.
A whole nother life of hell is what it felt like to me.
After learning of the child support situation, detectives are curious if there's a connection between Eddie and this tragedy. Just hours into the investigation, they interview the NBA star.
Mr. Curry. Yes, sir. Sir, Texas Child Police Department.
Despite investigators' suspicions, Eddie seems genuinely distraught by the death of his daughter and former girlfriend.
Yeah, come in.
But that doesn't stop investigators from peppering Eddie with questions about his possible involvement in the crime.
You may have been behind or wasn't paying your child support. Do you know anything about that, or can you tell us anything?
I have no idea, man.
While Eddie admits their relationship had its ups and downs, the fact of the matter is he never stopped caring for Nova.
She loved Eddie and Eddie loved her.
Still, detectives want to know Eddie's exact whereabouts at the time of the shooting.
Where were you on the night of January 24th?
Turns out, Eddie has a rock-solid alibi, one that can be verified by 18,000 New York Knicks fans.
He was playing at Madison Square Garden the night of the murder. He was traveling to Philadelphia that next day to play a game against the 76ers. There was no evidence whatsoever to connect him to this double murder.
There was no doubt that Eddie cared for Nova. It's clear that Eddie would never hurt neither Nova or his children.
But there is someone close to Eddie who might harbor ill will towards Nova. Eddie's wife, Francine. Those close to the couple say Francine knew all about Nova and Eddie's relationship and was none too pleased about it.
She sent me an email and saying that she had heard that, you know, Nova had his child and that she wanted to speak to her. She was upset.
Could Eddie's on-again, off-again relationship with Nova have troubled Francine? And if so, could she have hired someone to off her romantic rival?
Here we have a woman that has been in and out of Eddie's life for years. That absolutely gives her a motive.
But to investigators, it appears Francine is as distraught over the news of Nova's death as Eddie. And in their eyes, she seems to harbor little bitterness over Eddie and Nova's alleged romance.
She probably thought that he was being unfaithful just because of his fame and his money. And, you know, that's what guys in that field are known for.
As for any direct confrontations with Nova, it seems she never met Eddie's ex face-to-face and only spoke to her on the phone.
They had the one phone conversation and that was pretty much it.
There was nothing that gave any evidence whatsoever that she was connected to this crime.
For investigators, it seems like another dead end. But a day into the investigation, they uncover another possible, albeit indirect, link between Eddie Curry and the crime.
In 2007, there were a series of crimes committed in Chicago at the hands of the traveling vice lords.
Notorious for their brutality and ruthlessness, the traveling vice lords have terrorized the streets of the Windy City since the 1970s, and they aren't afraid to target professional athletes in the Chicagoland area.
They targeted first Antoine Walker in 2007. They tied him up with duct tape and managed to steal more than $200,000 worth of jewelry and money and cars from his home.
2 weeks after the attack on Antoine Walker, members of the traveling vice lords set their sights on Eddie Curry.
Eddie Curry was also allegedly burglarized by the traveling vice lords. Both he and his wife were duct taped and was robbed at gunpoint in his home in Chicago.
2 members of the traveling vice lords were eventually arrested for the attack on Eddie Curry. Given the gang's propensity for violence, investigators wonder if Nova's death could somehow be connected.
It's very possible that members of the traveling vice lords could have sent a message to Eddie and to his family not to testify against him.
It's a chilling theory, one that now has everyone in Eddie and Nova's extended families living in fear.
I was just scared for the fact that somebody was going to try to come back and get my grandchild.
Nova Henry always believed she and high school sweetheart turned NBA star Eddie Curry were soulmates. And after having 2 beautiful children together, Nova wanted nothing more than to settle down with Eddie and raise their family.
I knew that they loved each other and they would always somehow find their ways back to each other.
There was just one problem. Eddie was married. And after Chicago police find Nova and her infant daughter, Ava, brutally murdered on January 24th, 2009, they turn to Eddie for answers. But it quickly becomes clear that Eddie and his wife, Francine, are 100% innocent of any wrongdoing.
There was no evidence whatsoever to connect him to this double murder.
But investigators have learned that a year and a half prior to Nova's death, a vicious Chicago street gang, the traveling vice lords, targeted Eddie and his wife in an armed robbery.
Eddie Curry was a victim in that home invasion. That case was looked at.
2 men were arrested in connection with the burglary that occurred at Eddie's home. This could have been a hit specifically designed by the traveling vice lords to keep Eddie from testifying in trial against them.
Detectives know the traveling vice lords have the muscle and the reputation for carrying out such a threat. But when investigators put out feelers through their gang unit, the word on the street is these 2 cases aren't connected.
There was absolutely no evidence linking that case and those offenders in that case to this double murder. None whatsoever.
If the traveling vice lords aren't behind this terrible crime, then who is? Looking for answers, detectives circle back to the crime scene and discover a startling new piece of evidence.
Neighbors heard gunshots from Nova's townhouse approximately 1:20, 1:25 p.m. Interestingly, before the gunshots were heard by these neighbors, they heard arguing between an adult man and an adult female.
Nova's neighbors can't ID the man's voice, but they say this wasn't the first time they heard arguing inside the home. Questioning friends and family again, detectives learn another new piece of information.
Yes, I was calling with some follow-up questions regarding Nova Henry.
Even though Nova still carried a torch for her high school sweetheart, Eddie, Once the child support issue was resolved, she'd resolved to start seeing other people.
He was not going to be faithful, and she started to date other people.
Looking into Nova's past boyfriends, investigators have come across another familiar name, attorney Frederick Goings, who represented Nova in her child support case.
Frederick, to me, was like the equivalent of an ambulance chaser, except for he would chase women who would be involved in high-profile child support cases.
While there's no denying Frederick Goings got results in the courtroom, some of Nova's friends say he had begun lobbying to be more than just Nova's attorney.
He just tried to bombard her right off the bat with gifts and such.
Detectives' interests are piqued. If Nova and Frederick Goings were dating, it's an ethical violation of the oath Mr. Goings took as a member of the Illinois bar.
You don't date your client. That's just one thing you don't do.
Detectives decide to broaden the scope of their investigation, and in doing so, determine that Frederick and Nova often slept over at each other's houses, and that the more time they spent together, the more Frederick tried to keep Nova and her family apart.
What would you do without me? What would you do without me?
I don't need you, Frederick.
We learned from family and friends that the relationship was horribly volatile. He had attempted to isolate her from her family and friends right from the get-go.
Your kid's father don't want you. Who else is gonna want you?
Look, don't start. I'm not in the mood, okay?
He would talk about her, the way she looked, or make her think that nobody else wanted her but him.
One night, with Nova's friend Pamela Owens looking on, the abuse turned physical.
Where you think you going?
Out? Where you going?
Frederick came to Nova's residence. He came in and, you know, they got into an argument over me being there.
What? Excuse me?
Get up the steps, I said.
And he pushed her down the stairs.
When he put his hands on Nova, you were able to see it. That time it was visual bruises.
Searching court records, detectives discover Nova moved to file an order of protection against Frederick Goings, but never followed through on the paperwork.
There was an order of protection that was filed by Nova against Goings that she eventually let lapse a couple of weeks later.
If a claim isn't formalized, it makes it very difficult for police to follow through and to be able to find them.
This, unfortunately, is very common in the cycle of domestic violence. He pursued her. He apologized repeatedly and profoundly, and she forgave him.
But even though she never went through with the order of protection, Nova made it clear to Frederick the relationship was over.
She knew that this was going to be her jump start to finally being happy and free from Frederick and to give her kids a new start.
She felt like she was getting her groove back, her life back.
Given the gruesome nature of Nova's murder and the hidden history of violence between her and Frederick, investigators are beginning to believe this hothead attorney might be the one who pulled the trigger. Chicago detectives have eliminated a host of suspects in the grisly shooting death of Nova Henry and her daughter, Ava. Among those ruled out is her former lover, NBA star Eddie Curry. Investigators now have a new suspect in their sights, Nova's former attorney, Frederick Goings.
It clearly was a volatile, tumultuous relationship, several threats, physical abuse throughout the period of time that they were together.
In an effort to locate Frederick, police obtain a warrant allowing them to trace his cell phone. And within 48 hours of the murder, they determine that Frederick is in a motel in Michigan City, Indiana, some 57 miles away from Chicago.
They saw the defendant's vehicle parked in a parking lot of a Comfort Inn in Michigan City, Indiana, and maintained their surveillance of that.
Detectives decide it's time to confront Frederick Goings.
Chicago Police Department.
Yeah, I know who you are.
We just wanted to ask you a few questions about your girlfriend, Nova Henry.
Frederick Goings doesn't ask a single thing about Nova or what any of this is about. I believe he asked, am I under arrest? And he was told no.
Mr. Goings refused to answer any questions, and the conversation was terminated, and that was it.
Despite their suspicions, detectives and Nova's family must be patient.
I didn't leave my house for at least a month.
I was worrying about him coming around. Just imagine every second just being terrified, like the boogeyman is gonna come and get you.
With no physical evidence linking Frederick to the crime, investigators aren't ready to arrest him. Instead, they execute a search warrant for his vehicle.
Investigators were looking for more concrete information. They were looking for anything that they could find that would connect him to the crime. They needed something to go on.
It doesn't take long for the search of Frederick's car to hit pay dirt.
A live round was found on the passenger seat of the defendant's vehicle. They found that that live round matched the rounds at the crime scene.
Shortly after that, the coroner's office releases the results of Nova Henry's autopsy, which offers further evidence placing Frederick Goings at the crime scene.
Forensic examination revealed Goings had left his DNA inside of her and obviously had sex with her.
Investigators are taken aback.
The DNA inside Nova clearly was consistent with him coming by late that night and staying the night.
But why would Nova let a man like Frederick back into her life after all that he'd recently put her through?
I think for someone who is in a victim role in an abusive relationship, they just want to go back to that time when they trusted each other and, you know, they saw the good things in each other.
Whatever Nova's reasons for letting Frederick back into her life, the DNA evidence clearly places Frederick Goings at Nova Henry's residence shortly before she was murdered. As does surveillance footage investigators subpoena from the townhouse complex.
The day of the murder, they saw Frederick Goings' Range Rover pulling into her parking lot, and that vehicle remained there until 1:29 p.m. that afternoon.
That's not all. A search of Nova's home computer also places Frederick Goings inside her residence just prior to the murders.
Based on the forensic examination of the victim's computer, Frederick Goings clearly was sitting at her computer accessing his email accounts and bank accounts.
Between the shell casings, the DNA, the surveillance video, and the email records, investigators have more than enough evidence to throw the book at Frederick Goings.
On February 20th, 2009, an arrest warrant was issued for Frederick Goings for the murder of Nova Henry and her daughter, Ava.
I had no doubt in my mind that Frederick was the person that did this to Nova and Ava.
But during his initial pretrial hearing, Frederick Goings remains adamant he had nothing to do with either murder.
He turns around to us and says, I loved Nova and Ava. I didn't do this to Nova and Ava.
After 4 long years, the trial finally gets underway. During their opening arguments, prosecutors assert that on January 24th, 2009, Frederick Goings drove to Nova Henry's townhouse and begged her to let him in.
What do you want, Frederick? I can't talk to you. Come on. Can I come in?
I don't know.
Once inside, Frederick sweet-talked Nova into sleeping with him one last time. After they made love, Frederick began accosting Nova, though not about their relationship.
Nova.
What, Frederick?
What is this?
It wasn't in any jealous rage. It was fueled by greed.
$24,000 to be exact. Unbeknownst to Frederick, Nova had filed a petition contesting his attorney's fees in her earlier child support case.
Frederick Goings was sitting at her computer. He was looking at things, and at one point he opened the email that had a legal filing that Nova Henry's new attorney was going to contest his attorney fees.
That's when he literally went ballistic
No, get off of me!
and used his handgun to shoot 24-year-old Nova Henry and her 10-month-old baby girl.
No!
To bolster their version of events, prosecutors point to the autopsy report, the surveillance footage, the evidence seized from Nova's computer, and the shell casings recovered inside Frederick's SUV.
The Chicago PD did a great job of building a case towards him.
When it was their turn, Frederick's attorneys point out the lack of a murder weapon, as well as the fact that not a single eyewitness could place him at the scene.
the defense tried to do was to isolate each piece of evidence and place it in an individual vacuum instead of looking at it all together, which, you know, say, look over here, look at there, poke holes, reasonable doubt. That's what they're supposed to do. And they certainly tried to come up with alternate theories.
Nova's family worries the tactic could plant the seed of reasonable doubt in jurors' minds.
We were just so nervous, and anxiety was going through everyone.
You never know for sure what a jury's going to do in any type of case.
But there's one last witness who's yet to take the stand. A witness whose testimony will leave little doubt about what really happened the day of the crime.
I asked him, I said, who hurt Mommy and Ava?
February 4th, 2013, Chicago, Illinois. Attorney Frederick Goings is on trial for the shooting deaths of his former client turned lover, Nova Henry, and her infant daughter, Ava, the child of a previous relationship with NBA basketball star Eddie Curry. Prosecutors have argued that Frederick had Nova trapped in a vicious cycle of verbal and physical abuse. And when he realized Nova intended to contest the legal fee she owed him, he snapped.
When Frederick Goings discovered that objection to his petition for legal fees, he committed both the murder of Nova and Ava.
Frederick goes into his email and he discovers that Nova has a plan to take away some substantial money from him. And he goes into a blind, just rage, and shoots Nova and her daughter.
Frederick's defense attorneys have countered by pointing out the absence of a murder weapon or eyewitnesses.
Defense attorneys like to point holes and say, well, you don't have a live witness.
But as prosecutors are quick to point out, there is one survivor who witnessed the attack. Nova's 3-year-old son, Nathan Curry.
Nova's son actually witnessed this heinous crime. It's a delicate balance in getting to the truth of what happened and what's in the best interest of the child.
In a bold move, prosecutors lobbied to the judge to make an exception to the hearsay rule and allow Nova's mother, Yolande, to testify about a conversation she had with her frightened grandson shortly after she discovered the bodies of her daughter and granddaughter.
Courts are very strict about hearsay evidence. In this case, however, the court made a decision that he was really just too young and decided that Nova's mother was the best person to relate that story.
With the judge setting aside the hearsay rule, Nova's mother, Yolande, testifies about the chilling conversation she had with her grandson after she discovered the bodies.
I was sitting with him. My first thing was I unwrapped him from the cover, you know, just to check him to make sure that he wasn't wounded. He just started talking. And so I went along with it and I asked him, I said, who hurt Mommy and Ava?
Can you tell Grandma who did that to Mommy and Ava? Can you tell me?
Frederick.
Her son being left in this home with his mother and baby sister dead on the floor in his living room and having to be with them for over 4.5 hours. I hope to God he never remembers any of that particular day as he grows up.
Yolande's heartbreaking testimony erases any lingering doubts. And on February 12, 2013, the jury convicts Frederick Goings of 2 counts of first-degree murder. 51 days later, the judge sentences him to life in prison.
When they said life, I was satisfied because I knew that that would be like death to him, because his freedom and his arrogance of being able to do whatever he wanted is something that he cherished.
I just remember a huge weight being lifted. It was finally kind of some closure and a relief.
This was about money and the fact that he was so fueled by his greed that what ultimately drove him over the edge to shoot this woman. To me, that takes him into an entirely different category.
But even with Frederick Goings behind bars, there's nothing that can bring back Nova Henry or the precious young daughter she had with her high school sweetheart turned basketball superstar.
Eddie and Nova's relationship was flawed. And even though there were those tumultuous times in their relationship, Eddie loved Nova and his sweet 2 young children. This murder just ruined a beautiful young family, destroyed a mother and her young child, leaving another child without a mother.
I told Frederick, my life is forever scarred. I can't move forward. I'm stuck in this hatred. I'm stuck in sadness. I'm stuck in just despair because I'm so busy being mad at you. But the way for me to get over that is I have to forgive you so that I can go on. I go around speaking to people about domestic violence, abuse, about being aware of the signs. If it could just help save one person or make one person aware so that they could help another person, that was what I was determined to devote the rest of my life to.
The smooth, cultured voice of the biographer echoed down the line. I hope I'm not disturbing you? Rodney sat up. Justin, no, not at all. What can we do for you? Del perked up, waving his hands to signal Rodney to put the phone on speaker. Well, gentlemen, Justin continued, his voice crackling slightly through the cheap plastic speaker. I must say, I have been following the news regarding Derek's exceptional generosity. Ah, yes, Del leaned into the phone, adopting his most humble tone. Just doing my bit for the community. Justin, the money's not important. It's the smiles on the little children's faces that count. Quite, Justin said, though he sounded slightly amused. The thing is, Derek, your story has caught fire. The public is fascinated by you. The man who had millions lost it all, won a fortune back on television, and immediately gave it away to orphans. It's Dickensian. It's poetic. It's true, Del agreed solemnly. I pitched the angle to my publishers, Justin revealed, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, and they are absolutely desperate to secure the rights to your official biography. They see it as a bestseller. The Peckham Phoenix, The Rise, Fall, and Redemption of Derek Trotter. Del looked at Rodney, his eyes wide. A book. About me. About both of you. Justin corrected. The Trotter brothers. The unbreakable bond that survived wealth and poverty. How much? Rodney asked, his managing director instincts kicking in before Del could say something stupid. The publishers are willing to offer a substantial advance, Justin said. Given the current media hype, they are prepared to offer you £50,000 for the exclusive rights. The number hung in the air. £50,000. The exact amount Del had lost. The exact amount he had given away. It was as if the universe was playing a massive, intricate game of financial ping pong with their lives. Del's hand trembled slightly as he reached out and muted the phone. He looked at his brother. 50 grand, Del whispered. Rotters, we're getting it back. Don't sound too eager, Rodney whispered back, his heart hammering. Let me handle this. I'm the MD. Rodney unmuted the phone, clearing his throat and trying to sound like a man who dealt with 50 grand contracts before breakfast. Well, Justin, that's a very generous offer, Rodney said smoothly. However, given the international interest in Derek's philanthropy, we are currently fielding several offers from rival publishing houses, including Penguin. Dell slapped his forehead, silently mouthing, "Penguin, you plonker." There was a tense silence on the line. Justin cleared his throat. "I see. Well, my publishers are very keen. What if we raise the advance to $60,000 and a 10% royalty on all hardback sales?" Rodney's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. 60,000 and 10%. Is that acceptable, Managing Director? Justin asked. Rodney looked at Dell. Dell was nodding so hard his neck looked like it might snap. "Yes, Justin," Rodney said, his voice surprisingly steady. "We can accept those terms. Send the contracts over to our legal department. That's flat 368, Nelson Mandela House." "Excellent." Justin beamed. "I look forward to starting the interviews. Gentlemen, good day." Rodney hung up the phone. The flat was dead silent for 3 whole seconds. Then, sheer chaos erupted. Dell grabbed Rodney and started dancing him around the cramped living room, knocking over a pile of ironing and nearly sending the television crashing to the floor. "We did it, rotters!" Dell screamed, tears of joy streaming down his face. 60 grand. We're back in the money. Oh, the trotters are back. Chapter 12, Full Circle. 3 weeks later, the atmosphere in Peckham had returned to its usual chaotic rhythm. The media vans were gone. The newspaper articles had faded into recycling bins, and the locals had gone back to complaining about the weather and the price of a pint. But for Trotter's independent traders, the world had fundamentally shifted. The advance check from the publishers had cleared. Dell and Rodney stood in the middle of their lock-up garage, surrounded by the familiar smell of damp cardboard and engine oil. The yellow 3-wheeled Reliant Regal van sat in the center, newly washed and polished, though still sporting a slightly dented bumper. "All right, Managing Director," Dell said, slapping the roof of the van. "What's the financial status?" Rodney pulled out a brand new, genuine leather clipboard. He flipped a page with immense satisfaction. "Well, after paying off the remaining minor debts, treating Raquel and Cassandra to a spa weekend, and putting a hefty deposit into a high-yield savings account." Rodney tapped his pen. "Trotter's Independent Traders is officially operating in the black. We have 20,000 pounds in working capital." "Beautiful." Dell smiled, lighting a cigar and taking a deep drag. "And no taxman breathing down our necks." "No taxman," Rodney agreed. "And the book interviews with Justin start next week. He says he wants to dedicate a whole chapter to my leadership during the crisis." Dell chuckled, blowing a smoke ring into the damp air. Don't let it go to your head, Rodgers. You might be the managing director on paper, but remember who found the Harrison watch. Remember who kissed the 50 grand goodbye to save us from the inland revenue. You did that by accident, Del, Rodney pointed out dryly. Semantics, Rodney, semantics. History remembers the action, not the intent. Del grinned, adjusting his camel hair coat. He walked over to a stack of cardboard boxes in the corner of the garage and ripped one open. Inside were hundreds of brightly colored plastic contraptions. What are those? Rodney asked, peering into the box. These, my intellectually gifted brother, are self-heating, glow-in-the-dark soup spoons, Del announced proudly. I picked up 1,000 of M from Monkey Harris this morning. A bargain. Rodney sighed, a familiar feeling of exasperation washing over him. It was the feeling of home. Del, nobody wants a glow-in-the-dark soup spoon. Soup is a daytime food, or an evening food eaten with the lights on. Ah, but what about campers, rotters? What about power cuts? What about the late-night raver who needs a quick broth before hitting the club? Del argued, his salesman eyes flashing with the old, familiar fire. We set up the pitch down at the market tomorrow, 2 for $5. We'll clear the lot by lunchtime. Rodney looked at his brother. He looked at the absurd, useless plastic spoons. He looked at the battered yellow van. They had been millionaires. They had flown in helicopters and drank champagne on yachts. They had touched the very pinnacle of wealth and had fallen all the way back down to the concrete pavements of Peckham. And yet, standing in this freezing, damp garage, Rodney felt a strange sense of peace. They were back where they belonged. The hustle, the banter, the endless, ridiculous pursuit of the next big score. It was their race on theater. All right, Rodney smiled, closing his clipboard. 2 for $5, but I'm driving the van. Fair enough, Governor, Del winked, tossing Rodney the keys. Del walked toward the exit of the garage, pulling the heavy metal door down. The bright London sunlight spilled across his face as he looked out over the sprawling estate. You know, Rodgers, Del said softly, his voice full of that unshakable, irrational optimism that defined his very soul. What's that, Del? Del Boy turned back to his brother, a massive, genuine smile lighting up his face. This time next year, we'll be millionaires. Chapter 13, Radioactive Soup. The following morning at Peckham Market was brisk, carrying the sort of biting wind that made people walk with their heads down and hands shoved deep into their pockets. Perfect weather, according to Del Boy, for selling a product designed to keep a person's minestrone at an optimal temperature. Del stood atop a hastily erected wooden crate, a brightly colored plastic spoon waving wildly in his right hand. Roll up, Del hollered, his voice cutting through the noise of the market. Don't let the winter freeze your broth. Trotter's Independent Traders is proud to present the culinary marvel of the 21st century, the Apollo 11 of cutlery, the self-heating, glow-in-the-dark soup spoon. A small, largely skeptical crowd had gathered. Among them were Denzel, clutching a polystyrene cup of tea, and Trigger, who was staring blankly at the plastic spoon as if trying to decipher ancient hieroglyphics. "How's it work, Dave?" Trigger asked, turning to Rodney, who was standing a few feet away, looking deeply embarrassed while wearing his managing director badge. Well, there's a chemical compound inside the handle, Trig," Rodney explained quietly, glancing nervously at Dell. "You crack the handle like a glow stick, and a mild exothermic reaction occurs, warming the bowl of the spoon while emitting a phosphorescent glow." Trigger blinked slowly. "Right, but does it work with cereal?" "No. Trigger, you don't want warm milk on your cornflakes," Rodney sighed. "You're missing the point, Trig," Dell interjected, hopping off his crate. "Imagine this. You're out camping in the wilds of Epping Forest. It's pitch black. You're starving. You reach into your knapsack, crack the spoon snap. Suddenly, you have light and a hot meal. It's a lifesaver. It is." Dell snapped the handle of the display spoon to demonstrate. There was a sharp crack, followed by a faint fizzing sound. Slowly, a neon green glow began to emanate from the thick plastic handle. "See," Dell beamed. "Lovely jubbly. That'll be 2 for a $5, ladies and gentlemen." Denzel leaned in, squinting at the spoon. "Dell, why is it fizzing? It sounds like a cheap firework." "That's just the heating element warming up, Denzel," Dell assured him confidently. "It's entirely safe. Top of the range. Manufactured in, well, Taiwan, but using European specifications. Probably." As Dell spoke, the neon green glow began to intensify. It went from a soft, pleasant luminescence to a piercing, radioactive-looking green that lit up Dell's face like an alien in a B-movie. "Dell," Rodney warned, taking a step back, "it's getting really bright." "It's just showing off its power, rotters." Dell laughed nervously, shifting the spoon to his left hand. "Oh, that is getting a bit warm, actually." Suddenly, the plastic handle began to bulge ominously. A thin wisp of acrid, yellow smoke hissed out of a microfracture near the base of the spoon. It smelled strongly of sulfur and burning rubber. The crowd instinctively took to collective steps backward. "It's fine, perfectly normal," Dell insisted, though he was now holding the spoon away from his body as if it were an unexploded grenade. "Dave," Trigger pointed out calmly, "I think your spoon is melting." Trigger was right. The bowl of the spoon was visibly drooping, dripping hot, neon green plastic onto the pavement where it hissed violently against the damp concrete. "Right, that's the prototype," Dell shouted, tossing the melting, smoking plastic into a nearby puddle, where it sputtered and died in a cloud of yellow steam. Who wants to buy the finalized version in the box? Guaranteed not to melt under normal soup conditions. At that exact moment, a man in a high-visibility jacket with a clipboard the local council health and safety inspector rounded the corner, drawn by the smell of burning plastic. "Trotter," the inspector barked, "what in God's name are you burning on public property?" "Nothing, Mr. Henderson." Dell smiled innocently, kicking the melted puddle of neon plastic under his wooden crate. Just demonstrating the friction of my patter. Hot stuff, you know." "We're packing up now," Rodney yelled, seizing the moment. He grabbed the remaining boxes of self-heating spoons and shoved them roughly into the back of the three-wheeled van. "Come on, Dell board meeting. Urgent." Dell grabbed his crate, tipped an imaginary hat to the bewildered crowd, and sprinted for the van. As they chugged away from the market, trailing a faint scent of sulfur, Rodney buried his face in his hands. 20 grand in the bank, Rodney moaned. "And you're selling toxic waste at a $5 a pair." "Market research, rotters," Dell coughed, rolling down the window to let the yellow smoke out of his coat. "You never know until you try." Chapter 14, The Creative Process. The following Tuesday, the flat in Nelson Mandela House was transformed into a makeshift literary salon. Justin, the biographer, sat on the floral sofa with a sleek, silver dictaphone resting on the coffee table. He held a legal pad and a pen, looking eager. Del Boy sat opposite him in his plush armchair, a large cigar clamped between his teeth and a crystal glass of what looked like expensive cognac, but was actually a mixture of cheap brandy and watered-down port resting in his hand. Rodney sat on a dining chair in the corner, holding his managing director clipboard, ready to ensure that history was recorded accurately. Cassandra and Raquel were out shopping, leaving the men to their creative process. "Right, Derek," Justin began, clicking his pen. "Let's dive into the early years, the foundation of Trotter's independent traders. I want to capture the grit, the sheer, unadulterated struggle of a young entrepreneur fighting against the system." "Ah," Dell sighed, gazing out the window with a look of profound nostalgia. "It was tough, Justin. Real tough. Peckham in the 70s wasn't for the faint of heart. Me and Rotters, we had to fend for ourselves. Our dear mom passed away, God rest her soul, and my dad, well, he went out to buy a packet of woodbines and must have taken a wrong turn at New Cross because we never saw him again. A tragic origin," Justin murmured, scribbling furiously. "And how did you survive?" Dell leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. "I had to use my wits. I had a turf war with the local syndicates. You see, Justin, the briefcase market in South London was controlled by some very heavy people. I'm not saying it was the craze, but let's just say they knew how to use a pair of pliers. Rodney coughed loudly from the corner. Del, you bought the briefcases from a bloke named Jiggling Jim who operated out of a shed in Lewisham. The heaviest thing about him was his wife. Justin stopped writing and looked up. Is that true, Derek? Del shot Rodney a venomous glare before turning back to Justin with a smooth smile. What my brother means, Justin, is that Jiggling Jim was merely a front, a puppet for the international cartels. You have to read between the lines. Justin nodded slowly. I see. And what about your first big score? The moment you realized you had a gift for commerce? Ah, that would be the Great Diamond Exchange of 1982. Del proclaimed, blowing a cloud of smoke toward the ceiling. I was approached by a mysterious Russian countess. She needed to move a priceless Romanov jewel out of the country. I hid it inside a shipment of inflatable flamingos. Rodney snapped his pen in half. Del, that never happened. It's a metaphor, Rodney. Del snapped back. A metaphor for what? Selling 3 boxes of knocked-off swimming pool toys to a youth center. Justin held up a hand, his eyes gleaming with artistic fervor. No, no, Rodney, let him speak. This is gold, absolute gold. The public doesn't just want facts. Rodney, they want a narrative. They want romance, danger, intrigue. If Derek felt like he was dealing with Russian royalty, then that is his emotional truth. Rodney stared at the biographer in utter disbelief. Emotional truth. He's making it up as he goes along. Last week he told Trigger he invented the internet in the back of the Nag's Head. And who's to say I didn't? Del challenged, taking a sip of his port mixture. I had the idea for a global network of computers connected by phone lines in 1978. I just couldn't afford the soldering iron to put it together. Justin chuckled, entirely charmed. Derek, your imagination is a testament to the entrepreneurial spirit. Let's move on to the Harrison watch. The moment everything changed. Del settled back into his chair, entirely in his element. Well, Justin, it was a dark and stormy night. For the next 2 hours, Rodney sat in agonizing silence as Del wove a tapestry of absolute fiction. According to Del, Trotter's independent traders had single-handedly negotiated trade embargoes, outsmarted Wall Street tycoons, and narrowly avoided assassination by rival antique dealers. By the time Justin left the flat, his dictaphone was full, and his eyes were wide with the promise of a guaranteed bestseller. Del, Rodney said exhaustedly as the door clicked shut, when this book gets published, we're going to be a laughing stock. It's a work of total fiction. Rodders, my son, Del smiled, patting his brother's cheek. It's not fiction. It's literature. And literature, my boy, pays a 10% royalty on hardback sales. Now, grab your coat. We've got a launch party to organize. Chapter 15, The Launch Party. If there was one thing Derek Trotter knew how to do better than anyone else in South London, it was throwing a party with someone else's money. The publisher's advance had afforded them the luxury of renting out the entire back room of the Nag's Head. Dell had transformed the usually dingy pub space into what he believed was a faithful recreation of a Mayfair literary salon, which mostly meant he had draped red velvet curtains over the dartboard and hired a local student to play the cello in the corner. A massive banner hung across the bar reading, "Congratulations, Derek and Rodney, the Peckham Phoenixes." The room was packed with the usual suspects. Denzel was attacking the buffet table, which featured an alarming array of cheese and pineapple hedgehogs. Trigger was staring intently at the cellist, trying to figure out how she was making the big violin sound so sad. Cassandra and Raquel stood near the bar, sipping actual champagne, both wearing new dresses bought with the first installment of the book money. I have to admit, Cassandra smiled, watching Rodney desperately trying to schmooze a man from a local newspaper. He looks happy, even if the book is mostly lies. Dell calls it creative embellishment. Raquel laughed, linking her arm through Cassandra's. I'm just glad we're not running from the taxman anymore, or selling those glowing spoons. Damien found one under his bed yesterday and thought it was a lightsaber. Suddenly, the doors swung open, and Boyke strode, accompanied by his wife, Marlene. Boyke, the slick, sneering used car salesman, wore a sharply tailored suit and an expression of profound disdain. Well, Boyke drawled, his voice cutting through the chatter. He let out his trademark machine gun laugh. Dashy. If it isn't the Shakespeare of South London. I thought I'd stepped into the wrong pub, Del Boy. It smells suspiciously like success, combined with cheap aftershave. Dell stepped up to his old rival, straightening his tie. Boyke, glad you could make it to witness literary history. I'd offer you a signed copy, but I know you struggle with anything that doesn't have pictures of engines in it. Marlene giggled, kissing Dell on the cheek. Ignore him. Dell, I can't wait to read it. Is there any romance in it? Oceans of it. Marlene. Dell winked, mostly concerning my tragic, brooding nature. Tragic? Yes. Brooding? No. Boyke sneered, picking up a copy of the book from a display table. The cover featured a dramatic, black and white photo of Dell looking thoughtfully off into the middle distance, with Rodney slightly out of focus in the background. Boyke flipped to a random page and read aloud. And as I stood on the docks of Monte Carlo, the Mediterranean breeze whispering of $1 million deal, I knew that Peckham would always be my anchor. Dear God, Dell, who wrote this? Barbara Cartland. It captures the mood. Boyke, Dell defended, snatching the book back. You wouldn't understand. You lack the artistic temperament. I lack the ability to lie with a straight face. You mean, Boyke scoffed, though a flicker of genuine jealousy danced in his eyes. The Trotters had bounced back, yet again, landing firmly on their feet. Rodney hurried over, his MD badge polished to a high shine. Gentlemen, the publisher's representative is about to make a speech. Del, you're up next. The room quieted down as a nervous-looking man in a tweed jacket tapped a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the publisher began. We are gathered here today to celebrate the launch of a truly unique book. When Justin first brought us the transcripts of Derek and Rodney Trotter, we didn't know what to make of it. It defied categorization. Del puffed his chest out proudly. But the publisher continued, a massive smile breaking across his face. We quickly realized we were sitting on a gold mine. The public is hungry for this. They want to laugh. They want the absurdity. And so, I am thrilled to announce that as of this morning, the Peckham Phoenix has entered the Sunday Times bestseller list. The pub erupted in cheers. Del and Rodney hugged, the weight of the past few months finally lifting completely. However, the publisher yelled over the noise. It is my great honor to inform you that the book has debuted at number 3 in the comedy and satire section. The cheering abruptly stopped. Del froze, his pint glass halfway to his mouth. Comedy, Del echoed loudly, staring at the man in tweed. Satire. What do you mean, satire? It's a business biography. It's a gritty tale of survival against the odds. The publisher laughed warmly. Oh, Derek, you're always in character. The critics are calling it a masterpiece of modern working-class surrealism. They think the bit about the Russian countess and the inflatable flamingos is pure comedic genius. Boyke let out a roar of laughter so loud it startled the cellist. He. Satire. You're a comedian, Del Boy. A clown. Rodney buried his face in his hands. I told you. Del, I told you nobody would believe that rubbish. Del stood absolutely still for a moment. He looked at the laughing faces around the room. He looked at Boyke's smug expression. He looked at the giant banner with his name on it. Then Del looked at the massive, cardboard mock-up of the book cover, which clearly featured a small, golden sticker reading, a hilarious romp, The Guardian. Slowly, the shock faded from Del's face, replaced by a slow, calculating smile. He turned to the publisher. Number 3 in the country, you say? Yes, Derek, and climbing. And the 10% royalty on hardback sales. Del continued, his business brain whirring at light speed. Does that still apply to books sold in the comedy section? Absolutely, the publisher nodded. Money is money, Derek. Del turned back to Boyke, his million-watt smile returning with a vengeance. He raised his glass high in the air. Well, you heard the man. Del shouted to the pub. A bestseller is a bestseller. Who cares what shelf they put it on? The Trotters are officially men of letters. Drinks are on the house. The pub erupted again. The momentary awkwardness washed away in a tide of free beer and good cheer. Rodney walked over to his brother, shaking his head with a mixture of disbelief and deep, enduring affection. You really don't care that they think we're a joke. Del put an arm around Rodney's shoulder, pulling him close. He looked around the pub at Raquel laughing with Cassandra, at Trigger trying to eat a cocktail sausage with a toothpick, at Boyke paying for his own top-shelf whiskey because Del had secretly cut off his tab. Rodders, Del said softly, his eyes twinkling. They can call us clowns. They can call us satirists. They can call us whatever they bloody well like, as long as they spell the name right on the royalty check. Del raised his glass toward the ceiling, the undisputed king of his own ridiculous, beautiful world. He who dares, Rodney, Del whispered, a genuine smile on his face. He who dares wins. Chapter 16, The Silver Screen. The telephone in flat 368 began to ring with an aggressive frequency that the Trotters hadn't experienced since they were briefly millionaires. The Peckham Phoenix had not only remained in the top 3 of the comedy and satire section, but it had caught the eye of the media elite. Rodney, taking his role as managing director and literary agent very seriously, picked up the receiver with a practiced, professional sigh. Trotters Independent Traders and Publishing. Rodney Trotter speaking. Rodney, it's Justin. The biographer sounded as if he had just run a marathon. Have you got a pen? You need to write this down. I've just had a call from BBC Television Center. They want to adapt the book into a sitcom. Rodney dropped his pen. It rolled under the sofa, next to a stray glowing soup spoon. A sitcom. A television show. About us. Yes, they want to buy the television rights. They're talking about a primetime slot. Friday nights. Those creative embellishments have them absolutely howling. They want you both down in Soho this afternoon to meet the executive producer, Tarquin. When Rodney relayed the news to Del, his older brother practically levitated out of his armchair. The silver screen, Rodders, Del shouted, grabbing his camel hair coat. This is it. First the printed word, now the broadcast media. I always knew my life had a cinematic quality. I've got a natural screen presence, like Sean Connery or a young Michael Caine. 2 hours later, they were sitting in a painfully modern glass office in Soho. The producer, Tarquin, was a man in his late 20s who wore a suit jacket over a vintage band t-shirt and had hair that looked like it had been styled in a wind tunnel. Derek, Rodney, absolute legends. Tarquin beamed, offering them bottles of imported sparkling water. I devoured the book. The Russian Countess, the exploding briefcases, the time you accidentally smuggled a live badger in a grandfather clock at gold. Pure, unadulterated, working-class gold. We prefer entrepreneurial grit, Tarquin, Del corrected smoothly, sipping the fizzy water and trying not to grimace. But yes, it's a hell of a story. Now, about the casting. Del leaned forward, adopting a serious, artistic expression. I've been giving it a lot of thought. I know it's unusual for the subject of a biography to play themselves, but I feel that only I can truly capture the nuance, the tragedy, and the raw magnetism of Derek Trotter. Tarquin stared at Del for a moment, then burst into a loud, braying laugh. Oh, you're brilliant. Always on, aren't you? Always doing the bit. It's fantastic. Del's smile faltered. I'm not doing a bit. I'm a natural actor. I once played the back end of a donkey in the Peckham Nativity play and had the vicar in tears. Derek, baby, listen, Tarquin said, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. We've already cast the roles. We need professional comedic actors. For you, we've secured a fantastic talent. Short, a bit balding, very funny, specializes in playing, well, lovable losers. A real clown. Del's face turned the color of a ripe plum. A short, balding clown. And for Rodney, Tarquin continued, oblivious to Del's rising fury, we've got this brilliant 19-year-old kid. 6'5". Looks like he's made of pipe cleaners. Absolute master of physical comedy. He falls over just walking into a room. Rodney sank lower in his sleek designer chair, covering his face. Now, Tarquin clapped his hands together. We're offering a handsome rights fee. 40 grand up front, plus a consulting fee if you let us shadow you for a week to get the Peckham vibe. Del stood up slowly, buttoning his coat with trembling fingers. His pride was wounded, bleeding out on the glass table. 40 grand. To watch my life be turned into a circus act by a bald man and a teenager made of pipe cleaners? Tarquin looked confused. Is the money not enough? Del looked at Rodney, who gave a tiny, desperate nod. 40 grand was 40 grand. It's not about the money, Tarquin, Del said, pulling his shoulders back and raising his chin. It's about artistic integrity. Make the check payable to Trotter's independent traders, and the consulting fee better cover my petrol. Chapter 17, The Voice of Scotland. Despite the humiliation of the TV deal, the cash injection had given Del Boy a renewed sense of invincibility. He was determined to prove to the world, and especially to Boyke, that he was a serious businessman, not just a punchline for a BBC sitcom. Technology, Rotters, Del announced a few days later, marching into the flat followed by two delivery men carrying large, heavy cardboard boxes. That's where the real money is. Forget antiques. Forget publishing. The future is the smart home. What have you bought now? Del. Cassandra sighed from the dining table, where she was helping Rodney review the television contracts. I have secured the exclusive South London distribution rights for the Caledonian Toastmaster 2000, Del declared proudly, tearing open the top box. He pulled out a sleek, aggressively modern toaster covered in buttons and flashing LED lights. It's voice activated, Dell explained, plugging the device into the wall. You don't push a lever, you speak to it. It's the height of luxury. I bought 500 units from Monkey Harris, a steal. Rodney looked suspicious. Monkey Harris doesn't sell luxury technology. He sells things that fell off the back of a lorry going over a very bumpy road. Why did he have 500 of them? Minor software glitch. Apparently, Dell waved his hand dismissively. Nothing a bit of trotter charm can't overcome. Watch and learn. Dell grabbed a slice of cheap white bread, dropped it into the slot, and cleared his throat. He leaned close to the toaster's built-in microphone. Toast, Dell commanded. Nothing happened. Toast my bread. Dell tried again, louder. The toaster remained dormant. Its LED light blinked mockingly. Maybe you have to be polite, Cassandra suggested, amused. It's a machine, Cass. It doesn't care about manners, Rodney sighed. But he leaned in anyway. Excuse me, please toast the bread. Still nothing. Dell frowned, picking up the instruction manual, which was printed on a single, suspiciously thin piece of paper. He squinted at the tiny text. Ah, Dell murmured. Here's the rub. It seems these units were manufactured for a very specific regional market in the UK before the company went bust. Which market? Rodney asked, dreading the answer. Scotland, Dell said slowly. Specifically, Glasgow. It has a localized voice recognition chip. You bought 500 toasters that only understand Scottish people. Cassandra burst out laughing. It's not funny. Dell snapped, though panic was beginning to edge into his voice. I've invested 10 grand of our TV money into this. There must be a workaround. Dell stood up straight, puffed out his chest, and adopted what he believed was a flawless, Sean Connery-esque Scottish brogue. Ah, toaster, make me some toast, laddie, och I the new. The toaster sat in stubborn silence. It's not working, Dell, Rodney said, trying not to laugh. Your Scottish accent sounds like an angry Jamaican man with a head cold. You try it then, Mr. Managing Director, Dell challenged, throwing his hands in the air. Rodney stood up, clearing his throat. He thought back to every episode of Taggart he had ever seen. He leaned close to the microphone, furrowed his brow, and yelled in the deepest, roughest accent he could muster. G-U-S a slice o' toast, ye wee basta. D-I-N-G. The toaster suddenly hummed to life. The coils inside glowed bright orange, and the bread was pulled down into the machine with a satisfying mechanical clunk. Dell and Cassandra stared at the machine in stunned silence. Well, I'll be, Dell whispered. He looked at Rodney with a mixture of awe and sheer horror. Rodney, you've cracked it. Dell, Rodney said, rubbing his throat. I can't stand in the market all day screaming Glaswegian profanities at a household appliance. Of course you can. Dell grinned, the salesman returning instantly. It's a unique selling point. The toaster with attitude, the appliance that demands respect. We'll sell them as novelty items. We'll make a fortune. Chapter 18, The Premiere. 2 months later, the back room of the Nag's Head was once again rented out, this time for the premiere screening of the Peckham Phoenix television pilot. A large television set had been wheeled in, hooked up to the pub's aerial. The entire estate seemed to have crammed into the room. Denzel, Trigger, Mickey Piers, Boyke, and Marlene were all gathered, pints in hand, waiting for the broadcast to begin. Del sat at the front, wearing his best suit, nervously tapping his gold ring against his glass. Rodney sat beside him, looking pale and nauseous. 5 minutes, gents, Mike the landlord announced, having recently been released on a technicality and immediately returned to managing the pub. The whole country is about to see Peckham on the telly. I just hope they capture my good side, Del muttered, smoothing his hair. Del, the actor playing you is 5'4" and bald, Rodney reminded him miserably. He doesn't have a good side. The iconic BBC globe appeared on the screen, followed by the announcer's voice. And now, a brand new comedy series based on the best-selling memoir. It's time for The Peckham Phoenix. A jaunty, slightly ridiculous themed tune played over establishing shots of the Nelson Mandela House estate. Then the actors appeared on screen. The man playing Del Boy was indeed short, energetic, and wore an aggressively loud checkered suit. He burst into the set of the flat, waving a glowing plastic spoon and shouting a heavily exaggerated catchphrase. Time to cash in the chips, you absolute plonker. The pub erupted in laughter. It wasn't polite laughter. It was deep, roaring, belly-aching laughter. Then the actor playing Rodney lumbered onto the screen. He was impossibly tall, tripped over the rug, and let out a high-pitched, whiny groan that sounded like a deflating balloon. Rodney sank so low in his chair he practically disappeared under the table. For 30 minutes, the pub watched as fictionalized versions of Del and Rodney stumbled from one disastrous scheme to another, culminating in a scene where the fictional Del accidentally glued himself to a briefcase while trying to sell it to an undercover police officer. When the credits finally rolled, the pub burst into a standing ovation. People were wiping tears from their eyes. Boyke walked over to Del, wiping his own eyes with a silk handkerchief. Del boy, I have to admit, I thought it was going to be an embarrassment. But that was the funniest thing I have seen in my entire life. You're a national joke. For a second, Del looked genuinely hurt. He looked at the screen, where the names of the actors were scrolling past. He had wanted to be a tycoon. He had wanted to be respected. He had wanted the world to see Derek Trotter as a titan of industry. But then he looked around the pub. He saw Denzel laughing until he coughed. He saw Mike grinning behind the bar. He saw Raquel, and Cassandra smiling warmly at him. And then his mobile phone rang. It was Justin. Del answered it, pressing the phone to his ear against the noise of the pub. Yeah, Justin. Derek. Justin shouted over the phone. The overnight ratings are coming in. It's a smash hit. The network wants to commission a full series of 12 episodes, and they want to renegotiate the consulting fee. We're talking hundreds of thousands. Del's eyes widened. He lowered the phone slowly. The sting of being a national joke instantly vanished, replaced by the sweet, soothing balm of cold, hard cash. Del, Rodney asked, peeking out from under the table. Is it bad news? Are they canceling it? Del turned to his brother, reaching down to pull him up by the lapels of his suit. He threw his arm around Rodney's shoulders, a grin so wide it threatened to split his face in two. Cancel it. Rodders, my son, they're extending it. We are a hit. We are a bona fide, prime time, ratings-busting phenomenon. Chapter 19, The Horizon. Later that night, long after the pub had closed and the celebrations had died down, Del and Rodney stood on the balcony of flat 368, Nelson Mandela House. The London air was crisp and cold. Below them, the estate was quiet, bathed in the orange glow of the street lights. In the distance, the glass towers of the financial district still sparkled, a constant reminder of the world they had touched and lost. Del took a sip of his brandy, leaning against the concrete railing. Funny how things work out, ain't it, Rodders? Del mused, watching a lone fox trot across the empty car park below. A year ago, we were millionaires sipping cocktails in the Caribbean. A month ago, we were bankrupts trying to sell radioactive soup spoons and swearing at Scottish toasters. And now we're minor celebrities because the whole country thinks we're idiots. Rodney finished the thought, though there was no real bitterness in his voice anymore, just a weary acceptance. Ah, but they're paying us to be idiots, Rodney, Del corrected, tapping the side of his nose. There's a massive difference. We're providing a public service. We're bringing joy to the masses and getting handsomely compensated for it. Rodney looked out at the skyline. Do you miss it, Del? The real money? The Harrison watch? Del was quiet for a long moment. He looked down at the gold sovereign ring on his finger, then over to the battered yellow three-wheeled van parked below, illuminated by the street light. Sometimes, Del admitted softly, sometimes I miss the feeling of walking into a room and knowing I could buy everything in it. But you know what? He turned to look at Rodney, his expression uncharacteristically sincere. When we had all that money, we were stressed. We were worried about stock markets in countries I couldn't even point to on a map. We were living in a world of sharks, Rodders, and we're not sharks. We're trotters. What does that mean? Rodney asked. It means we survive. Del smiled, the old twinkle returning to his eye. We hustle. We duck and dive. We get knocked down, and we get right back up, dust ourselves off, and try to sell the bloke who knocked us down a dodgy watch. Rodney chuckled, shaking his head. I suppose we do. Dell raised his glass toward the gleaming skyscrapers in the distance, but this time there was no longing in his eyes, just a cheerful defiance. Let 'em have their glass towers and their boardrooms, Dell declared to the London Knight. We've got the market, we've got the pub, we've got the family. He clinked his glass against Rodney's. And you mark my words, Rodney, Dell said, his voice ringing with that eternal, beautiful, unbreakable optimism. This time next year, we'll be millionaires. Chapter 20, The Merchandising Empire. The success of the Peckham Phoenix television show brought a new, bizarre kind of fame to the Trotters. People in the street would suddenly point at Dell and shout, "Time to cash in the chips, you absolute plonker." A catchphrase Dell had never actually said in his entire life, but which the BBC writers had deemed punchy. Naturally, Derek Trotter was not going to let this cultural phenomenon pass without squeezing every last drop of financial juice out of it. Merchandising. Rotters, Dell announced one wet Tuesday afternoon, hauling 3 massive cardboard boxes into the center of the lock-up garage, the bedrock of modern entertainment. George Lucas knew it, Steven Spielberg knew it, and now Trotter's independent traders knows it. Rodney, who was trying to read a very complicated tax form the BBC accountants had sent over, looked up with profound dread. Dell, please tell me you haven't bought more glowing spoons. Better, Dell grinned, tearing open the top box with a Stanley knife. I've secured the exclusive licensing rights to produce the official Peckham Phoenix action figures, or, as the trade calls them, collectible statuettes. Rodney cautiously approached the box. Dell reached in and pulled out a plastic blister pack. Inside was a lump of molded, flesh-colored plastic. It was roughly 6 inches tall, wore a bright blue suit that had been painted on with a seemingly trembling hand, and had a head that looked less like Derek Trotter and more like a melted waxwork of Winston Churchill. Dell, Rodney said, staring at the horror in the plastic casing. That looks absolutely nothing like you. It doesn't even look like the bloke who plays you on the telly. It's an artistic interpretation. Rodney, stylized, Dell argued, admiring the misshapen doll. It's all the rage in Japan. And look, they've got voice chips. Dell pressed a small, prominent red button on the doll's chest. The garage filled with a tinny, robotic shriek. I will eat your soul in the eternal darkness, the little Dell boy doll screeched. Rodney jumped back, nearly tripping over a stack of old tires. What the hell was that? Dell frantically pressed the button again, trying to stop the noise. Blood for the blood god, the doll cheerfully announced. Dell quickly shoved the doll back into the box and slammed the cardboard flaps down. Right, Okay, so slight mix-up at the Taiwanese manufacturing plant. They must have accidentally installed the voice chips from a rejected line of horror movie toys. No big deal. No big deal. Rodney yelled, his voice cracking. Del, you're trying to sell a sitcom doll that threatens to harvest the souls of children. You'll be arrested. Don't panic. We just rebrand them, Del insisted, his mind already racing to find the angle. We sell them as Edgy Del Boy, Halloween edition. The kids love a bit of gore these days. Let's see yours, then. Del opened the second box and pulled out another blister pack. The Rodney doll was a masterpiece of unintentional comedy. It was only 4 inches tall, incredibly stout, and had a wide, painted-on smile that made it look permanently intoxicated. Why am I fat? Rodney demanded, deeply offended. I am a slim, athletic man. They probably ran out of plastic for the legs and had to squish the torso down, Del reasoned, examining the stubby little doll. Let's see what yours says. Del pressed the button on the fat Rodney doll's chest. Mummy, I need a nappy change. It chimed in a sweet, angelic toddler's voice. Rodney closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. So, let me get this straight. You've spent our television money on a shipment of demonic, so leading Del Boy dolls and fat, incontinent Rodney dolls. There is a market for everything, Rodney. Del defended stubbornly. I'll take them down to the boot sale on Sunday. £1 each. Mange tout, Rodney. Mange tout. Chapter 21, The Red Ribbon. Fame, as Del soon discovered, was a fickle mistress. While the demonic action figures failed to sell mostly because a local priest had threatened to perform an exorcism on the stall, a new opportunity for quick cash presented itself in the form of a personal appearance. 300 quid, routers. Del beamed, waving a piece of paper in the air. 300 pounds just to cut a ribbon and smile for 30 minutes. It's money for old rope. Who's paying us 300 quid? Cassandra asked, looking up from her morning coffee in the flat. A new luxury retail emporium opening up in Croydon, Del announced grandly. The organizers contacted Justin, who contacted me. They want the stars of the Peckham Phoenix to inaugurate their flagship store. We have arrived in high society. Girls. Raquel looked skeptical. Luxury retail in Croydon. Del, are you sure this is a reputable event? You remember what happened when you were hired to open that petting zoo in Lewisham. That goat had an underlying anger management issue. Raquel, it was not my fault. Del dismissed, adjusting the cuffs of his pristine white shirt. This is different. They're sending a car for us. We need to look sharp. An hour later, a remarkably long, slightly rusted white limousine pulled up outside Nelson Mandela House. Del and Rodney, wearing their best suits, slid into the back. The leather seats smelled faintly of spilled beer and wet dog. but Dell was too busy waving like royalty at the bewildered estate kids to care. The drive to Croydon was long. As they finally pulled into a drab, gray industrial estate, the limousine slowed to a halt in front of a sprawling warehouse building. There was a modest crowd gathered outside, mostly consisting of elderly women holding plastic shopping bags and a few bored-looking teenagers. A massive, cheaply printed banner hung above the warehouse doors. Grand opening, Discount Dave's Poundorama. Everything must go. Rodney stared out the tinted window. Dell, this isn't a luxury retail emporium. It's a massive pound shop. It's an accessible merchandise center. Rodney, Dell corrected, though his smile had strained significantly. 300 quid is 300 quid. Put your MD face on. They stepped out of the limousine to a smattering of highly confused applause. A man in a cheap, shiny gray suit rushed up to them, sweating profusely. Ah, the Trotters! Brilliant, brilliant, the man babbled, shaking Dole's hand vigorously. I'm Dave. Discount Dave. The manager. Listen, slight change of plan. The local paper couldn't make it, but we've got a bloke with a Polaroid camera. Now, here's the scissors. Dave shoved a pair of rusty garden shears into Dole's hands. Right, let's get this over with, Dell muttered, marching up to the red ribbon strung across the automatic sliding doors. He turned to the crowd, flashing his million-watt smile. Ladies and gentlemen of Croydon, Dell announced loudly, it gives me great pleasure to declare this magnificent establishment open for business. He squeezed the rusty shears. They didn't cut the ribbon. They merely bent it in half. Dell grunted, trying again. The shears jammed. Give it here. Rodney sighed. Stepping up, he grabbed the ribbon with both hands and simply yanked it. The ribbon tore with a loud rip, and the automatic doors hissed open. The crowd of elderly women immediately surged forward, completely ignoring Dell and Rodney, trampling over their polished shoes in a desperate stampede toward a display of deeply discounted baked beans. Watch the suit. Watch the camel hair. Dell shouted, being violently pushed against a rack of cheap garden gnomes. As the dust settled and the Trotters retreated to the safety of the pavement, Trigger wandered out of the shop, casually holding a new broom handle. All right, Dave, Trigger nodded to Rodney. Nice opening. Got a bargain on this handle. 50 pence. Dell straightened his tie, breathing heavily. He looked at Discount Dave, who was busy ringing up baked beans on a cash register. Right, Dave? Dell called out. That's the ribbon cut. We'll take our 300 quid now, in cash if you please. Discount Dave looked up, confused. 300. Mate, the contract was for 30 quid, and you get a free multi-pack of toilet roll. Dell froze. He looked at Rodney. Justin negotiated this. Rodney asked quietly, I'm going to sack that biographer. Dell growled, snatching the toilet roll multipack from Dave's hands and marching back to the rusted limousine. I am going to sack him, and then I am going to sell his dictaphone to Monkey Harris. Chapter 22. The Rival Novelist. The indignity of the pawn shop opening was slightly softened by the arrival of the first royalty check from the Peckham Phoenix book sales. It was a substantial amount, enough to officially upgrade those cigar brand and allow Rodney to buy a briefcase that hadn't been previously used to smuggle counterfeit watches. However, success breeds resentment, and in Peckham, nobody held a grudge quite like Aubrey Boyke Boyce. Boyke had watched the Trotters rise, fall, and rise again with a mixture of sheer disbelief and burning jealousy. He was the successful one. He had the car dealership. He had the detached house. Why were people suddenly asking for Derek Trotter's autograph down at the pub? It's an outrage, Marlene, Boyke complained one evening, pacing the plush carpet of his living room. The man is a certified bankrupt, a peddler of radioactive spoons, and the BBC treats him like he's Winston Churchill. Oh, leave it out, Boyke, Marlene sighed, painting her nails. The book is funny. You laughed at the television show yourself. I laughed out of pity. Boyke sniffed. It's all lies. Anyway, if the public really wants to know the truth about Peckham, they need a refined